welcome to our first Candidly Kim podcast. This is by popular demand. We'll talk about that in just a second. Really excited to be back talking with you and listening to you. And I would like to say that it is day 30 of our governor's questionably lawful, but definitely unnecessary emergency declaration. I'd like to say that today was day 30 and the end of it, but it's day one of the next 30-day declaration of emergency for our state. We're going to talk about that. This is I believe it to be a constitutional dilemma that we have here in Utah. We're going to talk about a lot of things local, a lot of things national, cover a little bit of world news, current events commentary. Please find us, Candidly Kim, on your favorite podcasts outlets. We are on Podbean in our production. I'm with Doran Barton as our producer, and we're going to talk a little bit.
Yeah. Now, who are you?
I'm Candidly Kim Coleman.
Oh, Kim Coleman.
Yeah, Kim Coleman. So currently serve in the Utah House of Representatives. In my sixth and final year, I was a recent candidate for Congress in Utah's 4th Congressional District. We're going to touch on that a little bit. We're also gonna talk about Donald Trump a little bit. This race that we're in, and I'm a Donald Trump supporter, supporting him for 4 more years. So if you watch us, you're going to get a little bit of some Trumpness on this podcast. We're going to talk about some of the problems we have in Salt Lake City. It's not just in Portland. We have it right here, Doran. So
I had no idea.
Yeah, no idea. Well, you're going to find out a lot you had no idea about. And I think the thing you're going to want to ask is, why aren't we hearing about this in the news? Why isn't anybody talking about this? This is our capital city, our capital county. Why is there so many problems down in Salt Lake City? And the gateway to our state, it's the first impression you make to people who come here, business. Visitors, tourism is a strong industry we have in this state. And so this, what we're seeing in Salt Lake is absolutely very concerning, a little bit terrifying. We're going to talk about that. A lot of things you didn't know about, Doran. Doran also, I've got to prop up his Facebook page, Spit Take Brigade.
Oh, yeah. We have a lot of fun there.
Yeah, so if you need just a little bit of humor throughout the day, go there. It's a little not so reverent.
Yeah, the Spit Take Brigade.
Spit Take Brigade. It's hilarious. Let's see. What else are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about a little bit of our Utah COVID response. There's an editorial that came out today in the Salt Lake Tribune by the editorial board calling our response an absolute failure. What did they say? Let me use the right words. Tribune editorial, Utah is failing its pandemic test.
Their editorials are always worth reading.
Do their editorials pass any editorial test? Any journalism test?
Well, they're definitely an opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so this week was so big, and so it's kind of, I dropped my nose. It's kind of fun to start the podcast with so much that's going on. But one thing I think I need to wrap up is really a little bit about the race, about the recent congressional race. We're a couple months out from that, heading into the home stretch of the general election. And so a lot of you know me from that, and we were not successful in achieving the nomination, but we had a lot of success in a lot of ways. And so many of you have come to me and said, we still want your voice, and your voice is our voice, and we want to hear it, and we want to have an outlet. We really can't go to the Tribune and the Deseret News for reliable news and commentary. There's that other one thing that claims to be news, Utah policy.
Oh, Utah policy.
Utah policy. They kind of pretend like they're news. So, hopefully this is a place you'll come a couple times a week to get good, solid commentary. It's going to be conservative. generally with a conservative leaning, but I am well regarded as a principal conservative, but I am absolutely open to working with colleagues from across the aisle. Some of the things we're going to talk about tonight are in cooperation with citizens who are Democrats, who regard themselves as liberals, but we have found absolutely some common ground on some issues that are very important for our area. And so yeah, we're back. We did great in the campaign. We won the convention. Doran was also very, very helpful in the race as well. Did produce our Facebook Lives, as well as just a fantastic local community influencer, and very helpful on the campaign. But we had amazing support that we weren't really sure. I'm kind of a West Side girl, and I don't have any money myself, but we killed every fundraising record. I mean, every last fundraising record. By exponents, and wasn't sure I could do that, but we did that. So I'm very proud of that. So we were able to break some of that previous record. Also, we had very respected policymakers from Congress and that supported the race early on, came out and supported this race strongly. Congressman Mark Meadows, he now, of course, is the president's chief of staff. So it's kind of fun that one of my earliest supporters is now the first chief. Is that what you can call him?
The first chief.
The first chief. And, we had the NRA, we had Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life Group, we had the Freedom Caucus, we had Freedom Works, on and on. Congressman Andy Biggs, Debbie Lesko, Congresswoman Debbie Lesko from Arizona, just fantastic support. Jim Jordan. Some of those people were very key during the impeachment proceedings and held important seats on the judiciary and really kind of just held feet to the fire on that sham impeachment. So many dozens of local elected officials that supported the campaign because they've seen me in action. I've worked with them in the trenches. So we feel really good. I feel disappointed we didn't win, but I feel really good about what we accomplished. Won the convention, came in second place in a field of 4. Utah hasn't fixed the plurality problem we have. There's no runoff, so second place is still not the winner, but I feel really good about what we did.
I really enjoyed the interaction that you had during the campaign with Stephen Moore.
Oh, yes. Oh, I can't forget that. So Stephen Moore, and this is something that was really interesting, is he came to me.
Right.
And a lot of people don't know that, but he approached me, knew my record, knew the people who were behind my race, knew I was solid on policy. I'd actually worked with Stephen Moore and with the American Legislative Exchange Council on a lot of policies over the last 6 years. He's involved with the American Legislative Exchange Council, where I also serve as the chair for the Center to Protect Free Speech. So he was familiar with my work on that, and as well as the American Legislative Exchange Council produces every year a 50-state report, an analysis on basically our state health, economic health. And for 13 years of that publication, Utah's placed number 1. So I promote that book every year. I promote our standings and, kind of remind my colleagues in the legislature that we want to stay number 1 for economic outlook. So that book is called Rich States, Poor States. You can look at it online, see what makes Utah so strong. It makes everybody chase us for our economic policy. And, we have so many great things about our state. We do have the best tax policy, and we got to be real careful we don't try to mess that up. It seems like every year the legislature wants to mess that up a little bit, but we do it right. We have the best upward mobility. So for wherever you are on the socioeconomic ladder, we have the best state for moving up. Our income inequality is very, very low. Best place to start a business, best place to raise a family. I mean, so many metrics. Utah's number 1. And so we'll talk about this a little bit later. We'll talk about, how the pandemic has affected those things as well. I think I forgot lowest unemployment rates, things like that. So we do really well. And so Stephen Moore was familiar with my work, and I worked with him with that organization. And so he came to me and said, hey, would you accept me as your economic policy analyst advisor? And I said, absolutely, absolutely. So, and he's one of President Trump's top advisor, was his economic policy advisor in 2016, helped with transition and everything. So that was
he's
an
a good
honor.
guy.
Absolutely an honor. Absolutely. And he's one I follow. So, if you want to know, especially as Congress has been mulling over different stimulus options, things like that, go to Stephen Moore. He'll be very honest about it. He hasn't loved everything about the CARES Act and some of the latest economic proposals, but he'll let you know which ones are good, which parts of of them are good, and why. And so, we can call our congresspeople and let them know what to support. Stephen Moore, he's awesome. Okay, so that's where we are. People ask me if I'm going to run for anything else in the future. That's kind of like asking someone who just had a baby if they're going to have another one soon. I mean, honestly, I think that's close to that.
Yes, 5 more.
So I don't know, but we learned a lot. We had the strongest grassroots organization I think that's ever been seen in the state. At least people who know about such things have said that. We had a great digital tech campaign. A lot of people watched us across the country, how we adapted to a virtual campaign during COVID. So we know how to do a few things. So who knows? Maybe we'll do it again. Would you do it again with me?
In a heartbeat.
Future Doran? I know that there's a certain seat that will be up in 4 years that I'm really being encouraged to run for. That also is at the congressional level.
I can't imagine what that might be.
Can you imagine?
I'll think about it and let you know if I can dream up and ponder.
Okay. All right. Let's start with Donald Trump. Let's talk about Donald Trump first, because you know what? The thing is when I start talking about the governor's new declaration, emergency declaration today, I'm going to get a little bit fired up. So let's save that. Let's save that to last. And that really kind of also dovetails really well into what's happening in Salt Lake City. So Donald Trump. So Rasmussen just came out with, and they really are now the only real significant, reliant pollster on such things, especially the presidential election. First poll, Donald Trump is up 7 points.
Wow.
So that is significant. As of Friday, as of yesterday, they are tracking Donald Trump at 53% of likely U.S. voters. They approve of President Trump's job. And, less than 46 disapprove. So, I mean, it's a big jump. But why? What do you think is making the difference?
That's a good question, because the mainstream media makes it sound like
he's 20 points down.
Yeah, and he's doing a horrible job on COVID. And they're not saying anything about what he's done to negotiate some peace deals in the Middle East.
Okay, so that is one of the factors. So along with determining where he is in the lead with 53%, a 7-point lead, Rasmussen looks at what are the factors that affected people's their polling results. So one of the first ones is just that, is the Nobel Peace Prize. He's been nominated 3 times for 3 different really significant peace efforts, and particularly, this week was just a profound event and something that as I watched it on TV, I mean to recognize, these countries that came together in the same area, 6 feet apart, who have historical, millennia conflict in the region, and to come together to start normalizing some of the efforts in that area through that peace agreement.
And even Saudi Arabia allowing flyover
Right.
from Israel to UAE was pretty significant.
It is. It was an amazing thing. So Donald Trump again he's been nominated for the Peace Prize. So that has impacted people's support of the president, but they're pretty divided on whether he should get it or not. But it is something that weighed into this.
Well, yeah, because historically, peace prizes don't go to presidents of the United States that have actually done anything.
Well, it seems like the last president, I think he had a thought that he might one day try to attempt something that could maybe result in peace, and he was awarded that. Right.
Right.
Kind of like the Minority Report Peace Prize.
Right.
Or something.
Yeah.
So I want to mention what Tybring. I'm not going to say it right. I really should have looked up how to pronounce his name. So maybe I won't. It's Norwegian. Do you want to try again? Anyway, here's what he said.
Tell us what that Norwegian guy said.
He said, for his merit, I think President Trump has done more trying to create peace between nations than most other Peace Prize nominees. I mean, and not just this round. He is a 4-term member of Parliament who also serves as chairman of the Norwegian delegation to NATO. But in his nomination letter, he said, the Trump administration has played a key role in the establishment of relations between Israel and the UAE. As it is expected, other Middle Eastern countries will follow in the footsteps of the UAE. This agreement could be a game changer that will turn the Middle East into a region of cooperation and prosperity.
And if that happens, I think we're going to be left with Iran and Palestine looking like what they are. They're just bent on terror. They're radical terror promoting regimes.
And not about business, not about culture, not about peace at all. So that did play into that. Let's see, a couple other things. His daily job approval is great. Here's an interesting thing. They found that most voters believe that there's a war on police. And they want to make attacks on cops punishable as a hate crime. Like that is, in the survey, a large percentage. Let me pull up the... now, this was interesting. I didn't realize this. 3 out of 4 voters who've had violent anti-police protests in their community, they rate those protests as important to their vote in this presidential election. So that now has risen as one of their primary considerations for president. So it's not that much of a leap to look at who is more likely to make their neighborhood safe again. Among these voters, a sizable majority like the job President Trump is doing. 42% of likely U.S. voters have had anti-police protests in their community this summer. 42%. So that number was very surprising to me. Of those 42%, almost half of them say that those protests have turned violent.
What?
So almost half the country have experienced these protests in their communities, and half of them say they've turned violent.
That's a lot of white supremacists out there.
So interesting, among all voters, 65% say the violent protests are important to their vote in this presidential election. 65%. And 41% saying very important. So all of a sudden, this has risen to the top of half of the voters, almost half of the voters' priority list for this election.
If you've got groups that are creating chaos, you're going to want to vote for the person that actually promotes solving the chaos or dealing with the chaos in an aggressive way, and restoring peace and safety and freedom and liberty and all those things that we're used to enjoying in this country.
Well, there is a sort of a political science law that says that when things are are relatively peaceful and the economy is good and things are going well, people are a little less motivated. And sometimes that can be misinterpreted as apathy, but sometimes like, oh, things are going okay. But when the economy's bad, when there's unrest, then people tend to turn out and vote more. That's another thing Rasmussen found, is that there are more people that 45% plan to actually be involved in campaigns this year. So there's a lot more motivation to be involved.
So it's not just getting out on November 3rd.
It's not just going to vote. There are people that want to help to whatever degree, donating, making calls, putting a sign in the yard, all those things that as candidates, we need it all and we want it all. But listen to this too. 63% of these voters strongly approve of the job that Trump is doing. So among those people that are very concerned, and it's very important, the safety in their communities, he's strong, 63%.
Yeah, I read something about how Wisconsin is a really interesting study because of the way that Trump won in 2016, but the Democrats are really working hard in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. But Kenosha is in Wisconsin, and that right there should be fuel to that fire of, do we feel safe? Is there chaos on our streets? And which candidate is promoting a solution that's going to bring us peace, prosperity, and good livelihood and things like that.
Well, and what's crazy though is the left and the Democrats want to say this is Trump's America.
Right.
Now this is Trump's America, but this is your Democrat cities that are doing this. And we're going to come back to this because we are going to talk about how crazy it is in our own state. Let's see. What else did they find in this survey? National security. So, he was down a little bit a couple months ago on national security, but now he's popped right back up. So he leads on national security. The handling of the economy. So now he is 52% of likely U.S. voters. They rate his handling of the economy as good or excellent, despite the downturn in the economy with the pandemic. Despite that, so here's what's interesting. I think that's an all-time high, and it outpaces previous presidents at this point in the race. So it's better.
I gotta say, I'm impressed that the American people are willing to, are smart enough to see that, that COVID would be a challenge to any president, and you can't blame what we've all had to deal with on the leadership in the White House.
Okay, so here's the stat. At this same time, 2012, President Barack Obama only had a 41% approval rating at the same time. So President Trump is sitting at 52. That's significant.
Impressive. Yeah.
So all of these numbers are very, very promising for the reelection of President Trump. Things look really good. We still have a while. We have about 45 days, right, to this. So,
well, Joe Biden will say, "Wait till we have our convention."
Well, you are referring to the Harris administration.
Oh yes, featuring Joe Biden.
Featuring Joe Biden. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's talk about. You're ready to get into this? Because I gotta keep myself calm for this. Like I said,
you don't want to save this till the next episode? No? Okay. I don't know if you get any sleep if we don't get this out.
Okay, like I said at the beginning, we were going to open this podcast with this is day 30 and the last day, but the Governor Herbert just declared a fresh new emergency for our state.
These emergency declarations last for 30 days.
They last for 30 days. So here's the deal. Okay, and I can't stress this enough. And so if you followed me during the campaign over the last year, I talked about this almost every night because I don't think you can stress this enough. And I hope you get tired of hearing it from me. I hope you can pair it and move your lips right along with me. But we formed this amazing country, America. It's been called an experiment, and it's an experiment that's worked. And what happened was, of course, we came away from a tyrannical king, and he made all the decisions, and we didn't have representation. And so we decided when we broke away from him, we were going to create this unique government that would make sure we didn't concentrate power in any one person or group of people, right? So we diffused the power. And we said we're going to have different branches of government. And even within the legislative branch of government, the Congress, we said we're even going to diffuse power there. And through the Grand Compromise, we have different representation of the population and of states. And all three of those branches are going to be held in balance with each other, and with the ability to exercise to check their tendency, which is the tendency of power, to grow itself, to encroach, to limit the freedoms of the people, right? This was so important. It's so foundational. Utah, as a state, said we're going to model our state government after our federal government. We too are going to have three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And we are going to hold those in balance with a check on each other. And that separation of powers, there should be anyway, firewalls between them. Everybody knows what their lane is. The legislature legislates. The governor executes the laws that are created by the legislature. And if you think of that, why that's so important is not just the diffusion of power itself, but in the very representation of the citizenry. So if you put power in one man in that governor's seat, how represented are you when it comes to laws? You, Doran, as a citizen.
Well, that's, what's the population of Utah?
Yeah, you're one of 3.5 million people, right? You're one. But with our legislature, we created, we have 104 people who are elected to represent more locally the people. And the things that you experience in your area of the state are very different from what people experience, even on the other side of the valley, on the other side of the mountain range, on the other side of the state. So it's so important that you have strength in your voice through a representative. And so we now have, this is what happens. It doesn't matter to me what the nature of the emergency is. It is the pandemic. It doesn't even matter to me so much what he does under a declaration of emergency. What happens is when he has declared an emergency, he becomes the legislature. He assumes legislative power. Now, there are some limitations. It has to have some connection to the pandemic, but that can be pretty broad, and and the courts have generally erred on the side of that being very, very liberal. But in effect, when he declares an emergency, he says, I'm the legislature right now.
So generally speaking, if there is an emergency declaration, does the legislature have the ability to check on that power?
Yeah, so now Congress, as well as our state, we recognize that there's an emergency. We might need to mobilize things quickly. We might need to make some modifications to existing law. We might need to respond very, very quickly. So intentionally, our governments generally do give emergency powers to their executive, but nobody believes in this state. To the person I've spoken to among my colleagues in the legislature, nobody believes that those emergency powers were anticipated to be long term, for months. I mean,
so maybe
months.
there was a good reason to do this at the very beginning in March.
It should have been limited and short duration. But so here's what we learned. First of all, he did some things that really weren't under emergency conditions. And in fact, and I'll read this, let's see, let me pull this up. In fact, under his this latest emergency declaration, he's talking about there's some things that he wants to do with Department of Alcohol Beverage Control licenses.
Um,
Hurry! Change it. Change the law. There's an emergency. Go do something with the DABC. He's gonna suspend some requirements for using telehealth. Hurry! Emergency. Some other things. Let's see, parole hearings. So there's a lot of things that all of a sudden, these are policy things that is not the same as calling out the National Guard or something like that. But here's what we learned during coronavirus. We learned how to come together as a legislature quickly. We kind of worked out all the bugs for doing a virtual session. We've done 5 virtual sessions now, and we can fire that up pretty quickly. State law requires any legislation to have a 24-hour notice. So we can come together like that. So it is not necessary that the governor exercise this emergency declaration in order to affect law quickly and nimbly, because we can do it.
Right.
And when I look at some of the things he's done under a declaration, what he's talking about doing now, none of those can not wait for the legislature to convene.
Yeah.
So that's not why. Here's the other thing that's important for people to know.
Oh, wait a minute. I thought that the emergency declaration was necessary in order for Utah to get federal
funds.
emergency
That's where it's going
funds.
next. Number 2, he has justified these most recent 2 declarations in order to not put federal funds at risk. Okay. I don't want to use an overly strong word here, but that's not exactly true. So right now we are under a national declaration. And what that means is we are eligible as a state to receive federal stimulus funds, federal emergency relief funds, anything like that. As long as we're impacted and we can show that we're impacted, then we're eligible. We don't need the state declaration. And so when he says, well, we need it for federal funds, well, I don't know what the Department of Alcohol Beverage Control has to do with federal funds. And so, so if you don't need it because you need to be quick and nimble and you don't need it for federal funds, why do you need this declaration? Just because you want it. Just because you want to be the guy calling whatever shots you want to call and you want the legislature to stand down. Now, so I think what's important for me, what I would want you to take away from this is understanding that it's not about what he does with the declaration. It's not why he declares the declaration. The question is, should the executive branch be the legislative branch right now or anytime, and under what conditions is that justified?
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? Well, again, fundamentally, you're not represented.
Right.
Because you did not vote for the governor to make laws. What did you vote for the governor to do?
Just approve or veto the laws of the legislature.
Yeah.
And to make them happen.
And then to execute the laws.
Right.
So what has happened now is I have 40,000 people that voted for me to represent them.
And they're not getting any
They're not getting
representation.
represented. If you're one of my constituents,
If they call you and say, what's up with this
right.
alcohol beverage control stuff that's changing, and you're like, I don't know. They didn't even put it in front of me.
So you, right now, if you're a citizen of Utah, you don't have representation in the lawmaking process. The governor took it. Again, you may love what he's doing with it, and you may feel like, I think the governor will make a better decision than the legislature. I hope you don't make those decisions based on some, specific current event. This is the place really where it's important to talk about the principles and really why our government was formed this way. So if, I talked to your representative, I talked to your Utah House rep, I talked to your state senator and asked them where they are on this. Because if they're fine letting the governor do their job right now and usurp their legislative authority, I might be concerned.
So let me ask you this, Kim.
Any party, Republican and by the way, I didn't disclaim at the beginning, we might break Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment here and there. Do you know what that is?
That's not
Thou shalt not.
That's not the 80-20 thing.
That's
you're not supposed to speak ill of other Republicans.
Republicans shall not speak ill of other Republicans. We might violate that once in a while. And I don't want to, I don't want to speak ill of fellow Republicans, but I do want to remind you, the voter, you, the citizen, that we have separation of powers in Utah for a reason. It is to keep your government in check and not put so much power and authority in a single person. And he's grabbed that. And so there is no policy, good or bad, that really can justify corroding the system that we have.
So would you say, Kim, that the leadership of the legislature right now is probably just waiting to hear just how upset the citizens could become from this? I mean, is this like call your legislator?
Okay, so you can call the legislature. So here's what the law says. The law says an emergency declaration may only last 30 days unless the legislature says it can go longer. So we let the first umpteen days expire and said no more, but then the governor declared a new 30 days. So that should have ended today. But clearly, the law is very clear. It is plain language, Doran. It is plain language that says an emergency declaration may not go longer than 30 days without an act of the legislature. He just declared another 30 days. And it is the same. He can't say, unless he thinks we're all stupid, which sometimes, I think sometimes he does think we're stupid, but unless he thinks we're stupid, the plain language of the law is he may not extend it. But he wants to say, well, no, it's just separate, new emergency declarations that I'm not letting go longer than 30 days. You got to be kidding me. It is predicated, these multiple emergency declarations are predicated upon the same emergency situation.
Correct.
This declaration is not for an earthquake or hurricane last week.
It's the same virus that we've been dealing with
virus has a name.
March.
COVID-19, same virus, same national pandemic.
Right.
So this is very concerning to me. And, I've had people ask me, well, whose fault is this? Is this his fault or is it the legislature's? Or
is it our fault?
Or is it the people's fault? The kind of government we have was meant to have a check on each other. So there is a safeguard in the law that says the legislature can end a 30-day declaration by a joint resolution of the two chambers, but we're being told that there aren't the votes there. So this is where you need to go to your representative, your senator, because I'm being told that not enough of the House members or the senators want to end the declaration. But let's be clear. I'm not talking about ending a declaration. I'm talking about the state legislature renewing and retrieving back their constitutional authority to be the legislative body away from the executive branch, who it is the tendency of people in power to want more and grow more. It's the tendency of government to grow itself in scope and size and power and authority. And so that's why we exist, to keep a check on the governor. But he took this, and we're being told that there are not enough representatives and senators to stop it.
Yeah, and it really does seem like this is not something that would come down on party lines at all.
No. And so here's a question I was asked, a little bit troubling to me. Well, what's he doing that's so bad under the Declaration that we should fear, or we should stop it, or we should grab our pitchforks? For me, that he has it. Just
that
period.
He has it.
That he has
that
it.
He did it in the first place.
That he did it in the first place. And it's very troubling. And honestly, again.
And I remember during the campaign, you would often say the jealously guard
your constitutional duty, and the separation of powers. Keep that separation. And because that is existential. I mean, that is the long-term foundation of our government. But, the question should not be, well, is he doing anything particularly bad with it? Can't we just let him keep going? The fact that he grabbed killed our check, killed that separation, blurred the lines, veered into our lane, and took our constitutional authority.
And for no good reason.
For no real justification, yeah.
Right.
For no good reason. So love what he's doing with it, or hate what he's doing with it. The fact that he took it is problematic. Right. Okay, so let's move on to another topic. So along with that, as Tribune editorial board said today, just this afternoon, Utah is failing its pandemic test. Now, this is the editorial board. It's not a particular reporter. It's a kind of big deal when an editorial board comes together on a piece and they say we've failed. Utah calls itself the best managed state, which we are, as I mentioned earlier, in rich states, poor states, 13 years in a row, documents that. Stephen Moore, as the co-author on the book. After 6 months of experience, it's clear that Utah's leaders have perhaps done the worst job of any state in managing the COVID-19 pandemic, endangering our lives and dragging our economy down. What do you think, Doran?
Our economy is doing pretty good compared to other states. We've got like the lowest or one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country right now.
So, we have tended to weather this pandemic and the economic impacts better than most states. We still have maintained the lowest unemployment rate. Our economy is pretty well in the upswing. But here's a quote, and I think this comes from the New York Times. I accidentally erased the citation for this, but somewhere along the way, our achievable goal of flattening the curve for COVID-19 has mutated into finding a cure, which is perhaps an impossible one.
Right.
Public health and economic policy must be based on reality and not starry-eyed wish-making. Otherwise, people's lives and livelihoods are in grave danger. And so, as we know, we have, it was not very long into the pandemic of shutting things down that we realized, well, not that we realized, lots of us knew this was coming, is, to have such an adverse economic impact, joblessness, wage reductions, businesses closing, that has its own impact on health. And COVID-19 is not the only thing that's killing people.
Correct.
And but some, some segments of society want to ignore those factors. And
I think the Babylon Bee had a really good, they're satire, of course, but they had a really good story about Gavin Newsom was keeping California shut down until a cure for death was found.
Well, okay, so yeah, the mayor of Los Angeles has said that his city will, quote, never be completely open until we have a cure for coronavirus. What planet is he on? What planet is he
How
on?
did they survive before COVID when people got a cold and went to work and got other people sick?
Well, and that really is the question is, where's that balance? There's criticism about policymakers making policy that, for me as a policymaker, I take in all kinds. I have 40,000 people I represent who are from all different sectors of employment, all walks of life, all different experiences, and so I'm open to hearing all the ways they're impacted, and so not even necessarily an expert in any one thing, but we have to be kind of generalists in a lot of things. Whereas the health experts are very focused on the one thing they do, and but the policymakers really are in the better position to take on all aspects of any policy impacts, and that's the national level. That's here locally. In fact, the editorial board criticized the fact that one of our new health administrators, we changed the law just recently in the last special session to allow a broader range of qualifications. He or she does not have to be a doctor, doesn't have to be a healthcare professional. We're looking for an administrator who's really fantastic at administrating, and he can put his expert team together. So that was a criticism that came out of this editorial board. And for me, I feel like I've worked a lot in the policy area of deregulating, licensing, restrictions that really keep good qualified people from working in all kinds of areas. So, I was all supportive of this. Let's put the best person for the job in that job. And regardless of maybe what their degree is in particular. But, I think that we will look back on this and wonder if we relied too much on just the health professionals and less on Stephen Moore and people like him.
So I have a question about this editorial. Did they address the spike in positive test cases this week?
Well, yes. So that is where primarily they're saying we failed, is because cases are going up. And again, as I just mentioned, the original, if there is a test, the test that we were all told all along was it's flattening the curve.
And we're flattening the curve.
Flattening the curve.
And the reason that we were flattening the curve was to keep our hospitals from being overrun.
So we're going to test your production ability, Doran, and see if you can throw this this chart up that shows how we really have flattened the curve. So about the same number of people are going to get exposed, are going to have the disease over time, but we don't overwhelm our hospitals. So what we see is people are getting out and about, they are testing positive. But our hospitalizations are not really going up. Our deaths are still very low. Hospitalizations are very low. The system is not being overwhelmed. And, the fear originally was, if we have too many sick people, some are not going to get the treatment that they need. And we did see early countries, China was one, experiencing this. So we have flattened it, and we're not seeing this. Well, the editorial assumes that the high rates of this week will be many, many more high rates in deaths over the next 2 weeks. And so we don't have those numbers yet. So they're saying really this is...
They're kind of jumping the gun.
Yeah, they're jumping the gun. But, some of these cases are going to be college because we all went back to school, right? So a lot of the schools have gone back to school or as soon as have gone back to school, college and K-12. And so that's where some of the cases are. That's not where we see death, and that's not where we see ICU admissions. It's not where we see people on ventilators. And it is a concern to me. I do live with my father who has COPD, emphysema. He's on oxygen. I think he would not do well with this disease. I don't want to see him go through it, but the target changed, right? So where we said our objective for distancing, for isolating when if you do contract the disease, for wearing a mask in public, for keeping 6 feet distance is to flatten the curve. Now that we're seeing some rises in cases, now that the target is a cure. When this disease is cured, you can come out freely and reopen your
Kim,
business.
you just hate science.
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't be saying these things.
Yeah, I hate science. So
science is real.
So we do. I mean, we have alarming numbers for increase in domestic violence, increase in mental health challenges and services, suicide ideation, levels of stress and anxiety, and all of those things. Again, COVID,
domestic violence,
and COVID is not the only thing that can and is killing people. So, I think our state's done a relatively good job, and comparatively really good job with not overwhelming our system, and our death rates still tend to hover around the people with comorbidities and those high risk categories.
Right.
So we've done pretty well despite the governor taking legislative authority. So we just keep moving the target on this. Okay, let's talk about Salt Lake City now, because here's a question that I've asked in this whole thing: where are our hot spots?
Hotspots for
the disease,
for COVID?
Because a lot of places have gotten really good at identifying, like they know, okay, X%, X number, especially early on, happened in the nursing homes and the care centers and the assisted living centers.
Well, I remember early on, the Salt Lake County had a map broken down by zip code of where the numbers were. And early on, it was like the top 10 zip codes all touched downtown Salt Lake City.
So I've asked for those numbers for weeks. Can't get them. And now there are some privacy laws, so they can't, just tell you Jane Doe, lives in West Jordan and died of COVID. But we can get the numbers. Those are not HIPAA violations. We can get the numbers. And if you're in a hospital and you are in the ICU unit, or you die from COVID in that hospital, somebody knows your address. And it would be good to know where our hot spots are. Where are we really, and transmission maybe isn't the biggest concern. It really is who is our vulnerable population. So we know we've seen some small pockets in Salt Lake City among our homeless population, people who are experiencing homelessness, with not a real great plan. There was not a great plan, and that's for another show when I talk about our disastrous homeless services, just craziness. But we're going to touch on it a little bit tonight. So last week started getting a number of phone calls, emails, people reaching out to me, social media, talking about concern about some stuff happening in their neighborhoods. A lot more property crime, a lot more visible sort of strangers that are going through that they're not used to seeing, cars broken into. One lady talked about a man had broken into, I guess, into a home or a car, but sat on her front porch, smoked a cigarette, and rifled through a lady's purse that he had, clearly stolen, found, and left what he didn't want and left. And she described her area as the Thunderdome. And this is a part where I am talking to Salt Lake City residents where we probably don't vote for the same people. we very likely are on different sides of political aisles, but this is a place where, like the Rasmussen report noted, that it is high on the minds of people that they are experiencing things in their neighborhoods where it's an increase in crime, it's an increase in protesting turned violence. We had our own events in Salt Lake City with, turning a cop car over and setting it on fire and paint vandalism, which, by the way, it's been in the news that one of our Democratic senators actually helped fund the vandal paint to commit crimes, property crimes at the DA's office. I'm wondering what the Senate's going to do about their member there. Holy cow, that happened. Like, seriously, he bought paint. Should I say the name?
Sure.
Oh, it's Derek Kitchens, Senator Kitchens, the Salt Lake rep. So I start looking into this, and I start listening to it more. You can go to my Facebook, and I have a post asking for your stories. If you're in Salt Lake, I want to know, because you've got some people that are starting to organize. They are very upset about it's a stand down order. So now I'm talking to police officers. They've opened up to me, and they've let me know that Salt Lake, the police department is under generally a stand down on property crimes order.
Wow.
During the heights of the protests, which we're seeing some of that curb now, property crimes were not to be enforced. So property crimes, this is your car. This is stuff on your body. This is your home. This is your office. This is your business. It's public property as well as your own private property. And so I have these people calling me saying, they will report these things. It'll be days if they get a call back. Now I have officers calling me saying, oh yeah, they start a shift 30, 40, 60 calls behind. A lot of them are property crimes. And some of these officers are defiant. They're just flat out saying, I was hired to enforce the law. Property crime is still a law. One of them shared with me that they were told, that they had the scenario. Look, we're watching other cities where cars are being surrounded, and people will start beating up on the car, vandalizing the car. And when we have a tourist attraction in our city, and we are, tourism is a very big industry in our city. People come new to a city. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but, you find yourself in a neighborhood. You're not sure if it's a good neighborhood, bad neighborhood, if you're in the right neighborhood, wrong neighborhood. But how easy could it be for anybody new to our city, or even someone like me? I don't live in Salt Lake City. I'm not all that familiar with all the streets. I could get lost, go down a wrong street. And so we've seen just horrible events in other cities where cars have been surrounded. People have been dragged out of cars. Cars have been, glass smashed. And so they asked about that scenario, and they were told, don't touch the property crime against the vehicle. Only get involved if someone's being dragged out of the car, or if the rioters have made their way inside of the car, and now there is a potential for personal crime against the body of a person.
This just reminds me of the type of attitude that leaders in places like Seattle and Portland, the mindset that we just need to let them get it out of their system. Oh, and to an extent, that kind of makes sense for something that's gonna like a Super Bowl. Like, you have riots after a big sporting event, and it flares up one night and then it goes away. But this has been going on for weeks and weeks.
It's weeks and weeks, and so we truly we don't have it as bad as Portland. We're not Portland,
right?
But we have elements of it. We have seen it. We've seen the stand down, and there are protesters that. Citizens, if you've ever been trained in neighborhood watch or anything like that, I mean, that is a lot about just knowing who's in your neighborhood and who doesn't belong.
Yeah, what's out of place?
Yeah, do you know who's there, what they're doing? And so someone sent me a video the other day of one of the he's been identified as one of the protesters. He's shown up in photos and video. But she doesn't know who he is. But he's one more person walking through her neighborhood again, but he's got tucked under his arm city signs. So someone, I mean, assuming him, but maybe not. He's got a stack of city signs. The one you can read is no parking. So someone has removed public property, city property. There's value to that. That is a crime. It's a prosecutable crime. And he's just got a stack, and he's just walking by, and she asks him, where'd you get those? Where'd you get that? That's city property. It's and he says, I bought them at Hobby Lobby. So like, you could go buy Salt Lake City no parking signs at Hobby Lobby now. That's the kind of stuff people are seeing. I have a Facebook post about a man who shared that his daughter left Primary Children's Hospital really after a pretty heavy day dealing with a very sick baby. And she just leaves to go get food, and she was surrounded. And there were a lot of things that were shouted at her, and there was kicking and pounding, allegedly kicking and pounding her car. There's damage to her car. And she called the police, and the police said, sorry, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. Well, little did she know, I mean, they're actually under an order to not enforce property crimes. So, until you're beaten, then we'll come. And I'll tell you, this is not even a criticism of Salt Lake Police. I mean, the officers I'm talking to, this is not in their DNA to not respond when people are calling for help. And for me, Doran, where's the line between someone's about to break your window and when they do and can touch you? I shudder to think of what can escalate in those circumstances if the police are not responding and you're on your own and you're surrounded. Am I going to wait? I don't know about you. Am I going to wait till someone's got hands on me to do something? And yet in my Facebook post on this incident, there are people that are discussing the importance of self-protection. And then you've got other people who are criticizing, saying, I'm inspiring vigilante, behavior, and I'm really not. In fact, some of the people who have sounded kind of vigilante, I really have disclaimed that, and so that's really not what we want to do. But gun sales are up in the country, and so is ammo. Ammo's flying off shelves.
Can't find it anywhere.
So that's a problem. We really don't want the scenarios where people have to take things into their own hands. But if the police don't respond, but Salt Lake is our city that is proudly defunding police. So I don't want to conflate these two issues too much because they're two very different issues. But when you see this influx of people in your neighborhood that you don't know, and you see they have stolen property, they're dumping out purses on your front porch. How brazen is that to sit on somebody's front porch with your stolen things and stolen city property? So, and then Salt Lake City has just for decades had a stand down policy on dealing with with people experiencing homelessness. And so sometimes how do you differentiate the people who came to town because they want to flip cars and set them on fire versus some of the people who live on our streets that really need some help? And so having kind of these stand down orders on all of these things. Here's what I found out. Let me read this to you real quick because this is interesting. This is from the Downtown Alliance, Salt Lake City Downtown Alliance. So that is a group of businesses that really try to make Salt Lake City just a great place to visit, to do your business. And anyway, they sent this letter to Salt Lake City, and it says, in the current economic crisis, businesses need every customer opportunity available. Due to deteriorating conditions, they are costing us opportunities, and we need the city's help. We have summarized our concerns and requests for actions below. Our concerns are based on first-hand experience as well as reports from our customers, many of whom report feeling unsafe walking downtown. So some of the observed conditions. We're concerned that the downtown experience is deteriorating with expanding encampments, abandoned belongings, aggressive panhandling, a brazen drug trade, and unsanitary conditions on Salt Lake City sidewalks and private property, which also it includes defecation and urination.
Oh, dear.
We believe that service outreach, encampment intervention, some of that abatement has really lapsed. There was a state effort, a couple years ago called Operation Rio Grande to abate some of this, but it looks like, a lot of it's returning. There is an active drug trade in the area of 3rd East and 100 South and the field area of 5th East. There are typically 70 to 80 people encamped on the parking strips in front of the office building and the church near 100 South. With garbage, bicycles parked, and human waste surrounding the area. On July 20th, there was a stabbing near 1st South and Main, the busiest pedestrian block in the city. There are numerous reports by shoppers and diners of aggressive panhandling and intimidation near the grocery store and restaurants along 1st South. And by the way, some residents reported to me last week or so, there was an outdoor cafe, outdoor seating that outside on the island, a number of people that appeared to be part of the protest group were sort of camped, barbecued, playing Frisbee, and then started harassing the diners there. And
so we heard about that happening in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, we heard about that in Pittsburgh, and it was alarming. I mean, they marched in and really threw people out, took their drinks, drank their drinks. So we had something not quite as serious, but pretty close there. Let's see. Saturday night, July 25th, there were more than 300 individuals on the streets and sidewalks surrounding City Creek Center. They were laying down, setting up camps, selling drugs, and buying drugs. City Creek Center staff has to escort guests on the public sidewalks who do not feel comfortable walking through the encampments and the drug huddles on Main Street. During the week of July 20th, at Creek Center were 5 people in restricted back-of-house storage areas and stairwells. These are locked areas that have to be broken into. And I heard from the story about Mr. Ibarra. I'm trying to think of his last name, but he reported that his office building was continually broken into, and nobody was really responding. And finally, one of the times he went in, encountered someone in there, and then he was assaulted. And
I know the company that I work for has an office in downtown Salt Lake, but nobody's there because we're all working from home. And I wonder just how many of these offices are currently
become
just
new
vacant.
shelters.
Yeah.
So this activity is having an adverse effect on staffing at stores and other businesses. Good employees are quitting because they don't feel safe. And this is in the middle of a pandemic when people are already losing jobs, having reduced hours. Their businesses is down for a lot of industries. And so now they have this on top of everything else they're struggling with. Properties near First South and West Temple are routinely broken into and occupied with encampments. And I love that the Tribune a couple weeks ago did a story about this and called them campers. And I thought campers sound so sanitized. I mean, I guess technically they're camping in a tent, but let's talk about what some of these people really are doing, including vandalism. Prospective tenants withdrew some offers for office space. So, buildings that are trying to lease new tenants, and this is what they're experiencing. But these potential prospective tenants cited the expansive encampment and garbage that overwhelm the area. Office tenants and employees do not feel safe walking to the grocery store. Other office managers and prospective tenants report similar concerns. Recognizing that most of the recent protests have been peaceful, there have been rioting incidents that have caused substantial property damage and threatened violence, which have not been investigated or prosecuted. Again, the officers are telling me that their stand-down order, they say, intervene when someone's their personal being is at risk. Property can be replaced. Property can be replaced. That's what they're being told. Don't worry about property. Property can be fixed and replaced. We pay for that. We all pay through that. We pay through that through insurance premiums. We pay through that through higher costs of the products we buy. Again, we're in a pandemic where we've seen a little bit of economic downturn, but now we're just letting absolute property lawlessness go. So we all pay for that in the long run, not to mention the people with the businesses. And maybe they're not adequately insured, or maybe just the whatever time it takes to repair this property is going to just harm their business even more while they're repairing. You look like you have something to say.
Well, I was thinking about the fact that if you are physically harmed or physically threatened in a situation like that, how often could it be preceded by some kind of property damage or harm, somebody steals your property or causes damage to your property. And if the police aren't responding to what precedes harm to you as a person, they're missing that opportunity. I'm also thinking about the fact that cities that allow vandalism and broken windows and things like that, it just encourages more of that.
Well, and in criminology, which is, I have a background in criminology, it's a broken window theory. So the more that window's broken, the more it does attract the next 3 windows to be broken. And Salt Lake City has essentially hung the banner saying, we're not gonna enforce. But think about this.
Welcome campers.
Trespassing is a property crime.
Right.
So one lady called and talked about there was someone in her backyard. She was taking out the garbage. She thought it was a raccoon until the raccoon eyes went tall. And then she's like, holy cow, there's someone in my backyard looking in my windows. Property crime. There, that one's may or may not be responded to. And let's see. So they're saying potential media coverage or property damage downtown leave the prospective visitors and customers in the Intermountain region with the impression that the town is unsafe and should be avoided. And this is a trickle down thing. So I live in West Jordan, you live in Harriman, but this is our gateway. It is our gateway. It is our welcome mat, our welcome banner, and it's the first impression that people are going to have of our great state, and this is what they're seeing. Business and leisure travelers who depend significantly on restaurants, bars, retail, and hotel rooms complain that hotel managers that they are not comfortable walking downtown and choose to dine in the hotel or drive to specific locations. Recently, downtown visitors were observed walking toward the restaurants on Main Street around 7 o'clock after they encountered people passed out on the sidewalks, one of them fully exposed, with other people encamped near the sidewalk dining area. The visitors turned around and left. People are defecating and urinating in sidewalk planter boxes and doorways on Main Street and other key pedestrian byways. Planter boxes, green bikes, scooters, and private property are vandalized. Many planter boxes are in disrepair. Anyway, it goes on, and then they are asking, downtown customers and visitors experience a deteriorating and growing encampment and bio-waste and drug trade, and those experiences then become the word of mouth for our city. I mean, that's the Yelp world, right? It's the review world. What was your experience when you went to tour Temple Square, when you went to ski, or or Sundance. So this thing has to get under control, and government has a few main and primary duties, and the first one is protecting your rights.
So, has there been enough time for the city of Salt Lake City to respond to this, or are we still waiting for a response from them?
So this letter, I think, was sent.
Because I'm imagining
they were given I believe the letter asked for about a month to respond, and my understanding is that month just expired last week.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know, but I'll tell you what the police are telling me. So I talked to one and asked just this afternoon, what are one of your biggest concerns? And he said, well, one of the problems is you think of homeless areas of town, and you see cardboard, you see tents, you see tarps. And he described a new phenomenon that we have in Salt Lake City, and it is RVs. And these are RVs without registration, and usually people driving vehicles. There's a reason why, law enforcement really likes current registration, because, there is a good correlation with criminal activity and lack of a complete lack of registration. Like I've been dinged for being, not having my registration up to date. But these vehicles are typically unsafe, and they guess about 90 to 95% is an active drug trade. In one case, one of the officers looked at an area that had several and ran sex offender registry. And 3 of them were sex offenders that had dropped off. So they're not compliant with reporting. They're not compliant with, checking in where they need to check in. And they're not compliant with living in places where they're not allowed. And so they're on the streets, and they're in parking lots, and they're in alleyways. And so he said, yeah, this is very concerning, because they just really started popping up in mass. And I said, okay, so are we talking about 10 or 50? He says, no, we're talking about 100 to 200.
Wow.
And so you have this, and but the concern again is not, it's not really the social services perspective. So I serve on the law enforcement committee in the legislature. I also serve on health and human services, and there kind of is an intersection of there can be predatory behavior among people experiencing homelessness, and we've really tried to eliminate that, but it's back, and it's back big.
Well, I'm just imagining that the Salt Lake City will respond and say, well, gee, we didn't know that there was a bio-waste problem. We'll put porta potties along Main Street, and hopefully that will take care of the problem.
There is a mindset from many on the radical left, and I know this from my work with legislation dealing with homeless services, that absolutely believes people have the right to live where they want. And
that's why LA County has 60,000 homeless people in the county.
So so the concern, and I will not to be too hyperbolic with this story. There have been, I'm told there's some uptick in criminal activity, especially property crimes of the last couple months, but not extreme, not overwhelming. It's not, it hasn't multiplied so much from the officers I've spoken to. But the concern is that we're broadcasting now. So the word of mouth that Salt Lake is the easy place to go. There's no enforcement on property crimes, and the citizens are reporting absolute brazenness. Absolute brazenness.
So they know that they can get away with it.
Sit on someone's porch, and at the same time, Salt Lake, their police force is very, there's sort of a usual and customary number of what an adequate police force would be, and they're already very far below that, and there's some defund, redirect funding, and so last month, Salt Lake City Police Chief Brown, came and spoke to the law enforcement committee and said he's concerned about his force. There are a lot of mental health challenges, morale, mental health, a lot more need for peer support among police officers, and is there any wonder why, when they're kind of told not to do a big portion of their job, and we've got citizens that are scared, and some of the citizens are concerned about me even talking about it, so they're afraid of being identified. So I don't think I've identified anybody, but this is your threat assessment report. I mean, this is a big problem, and can get worse. I don't know.
And yeah, we're seeing this in Salt Lake City. We saw some demonstrations become violent in Provo in July. So
we saw the district attorney's office vandalized,
Right.
which is interesting to me because I mean, he's a Democrat, and I think probably is supportive of a lot of the messages that the protesters have as well. I think a lot of people are sympathetic to some of the aspects of some of the messages, but he, I think, is probably more aligned. But his office was vandalized, and there was a lot of pressure put on him to not prosecute the offenders, and I don't know where that is now, but it'll be interesting to watch. The law's the law, but he has discretion with what he prosecutes, or what charges he brings.
if Salt Lake City doesn't address this, it will resonate out, and we'll start seeing these types of problems in other communities. Fortunately, I think your city, my city, the police are not just going to let property crimes slide. But the fact is that you're going to see if it doesn't get addressed in Salt Lake City, it's going to increase in the surrounding areas as well.
So let me give you a number. I think I'm pretty close. Salt Lake City has about 147 patrol officers. 80 of them have recently requested background checks to go to other departments.
Oh, wow.
Other cities. It's more than half.
Yeah, great morale there.
So not a criticism of the police. I mean, I have a pretty clear picture that the police are understaffed, underfunded, and conflicted in their orders. So this is my first kind of outing on this. We're going to follow this. So go to my Facebook or comment on the podcast. Please share this information. I want to hear the stories of residents. And, I live on the opposite side. I mean, I live about a half hour away from where some of these residents are calling me from, saying, I've called everybody. I've called the mayor. I've called my city council member. I've called the police. I've called my legislators. Nobody will do anything for us. Kim Coleman, Republican. And can you please help? And I don't know what I can do, but at the very least, we can get the word out, and let's start putting some people together who want some action, and who are afraid. They're living in their homes afraid. And don't know what to do. So hopefully this is a place you can come. Facebook, message me as well on my Facebook. Well, Doran, what else do we want to talk about? I do want to talk about finally Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I sometimes we have these. What a wonderful woman, and just her stature as a justice on the court. Didn't always agree with her, but she made her mark.
I think probably the most touching thing that I've read since her death was what Jordan Tusher wrote about having met her when he served on the Supreme Court bar. and he said kind of the same thing. I didn't agree with her legal decisions, but to kind of paraphrase and summarize what he said, what an amazing and powerful voice in such a small person.
Yeah.
Because she was not even 5 feet tall, he said, and like 90 pounds, but such a powerful voice in a small body.
And really, I, as a woman raising a daughter, and not, I don't do much on gender issue stuff anyway, but there are some places where it's nice to see strong women taking a significant role, and that will, again, regardless of her decisions, dissenting or supporting, that she was a powerful voice and an icon. And but too quickly people want to say, and then there's the issue. We're going to save that. We'll save that for next time. We'll talk about the court later. And we have a lot to talk about the court later. But anyway, please interact with the podcast. Again, this is Candidly Kim, and you can find us on Facebook. We'll be promoting this. We need your help sharing with your friends, our message getting out, especially as we mentioned on the Salt Lake City crime, other issues. Talk to your representatives about how much they really like being a representative or a senator, or how much they're just okay having the governor be that for you. And let's talk. And we're going to do this we're going to shoot for twice a week. There's a lot to talk about tonight.
Can you tell us anything about what's coming? Do you have some guests lined up that maybe we can look forward to?
So if you noticed during our Facebook Lives, we had some pretty amazing guests. I mean, we had Andy Biggs, Stephen Moore. So I've got some requests out, and I think we're going to have some really neat things. You are going to get a little bit of Trump with me. I do serve on one of the advisory boards for one of the coalitions. Dr. Mary Tipton, she's got a lot to talk about. She is great. She was just also announced as one of the advisors on the board for medical practitioners for Trump. That's amazing. So right here, I don't know, there's about 20 or so coalitions. So right here, two of us right in this area of the valley are on advisory boards for Trump. So plus on the 28th, I have a big announcement for a new effort that I'm in, and it really does dovetail with our some of this stuff going on with Antifa, BLM, and when our protests turn violent into rioting. And so I'll
wear my Hawaiian shirt that day.
So I have a big announcement there. But we're gonna have a lot of good guests and a lot of good topics, and we're gonna speak very candidly about it. That's why, we kind of looked at a lot of different names for this podcast. Like we were looking at Untethered Coleman, Unrestricted, Unleashed, Coleman, Kim Unleashed. Because I have always been tethered and leashed and restricted, and
it's a new side of Kim we've never seen before.
Yeah. Not even. Anyway, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you in a couple days with a lot to talk about. And please find us on your favorite podcast stations, and find us on Facebook. So, see you soon.
Thank you.